All right, anatomy students, today we're going to discuss the connective tissues in our tissue unit video lecture series. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, today we're going to cover connective tissue. This would probably take at least 2 class bells to do, but we should be able to cover all of this in one video lesson. So let's go ahead and get started. Connective tissue is the most abundant and widely distributed tissue in the body. They are also the most heterogeneous of the group, meaning that they're very different from one end of the spectrum to the other. They perform numerous functions, such as they bind tissues together, they support and strengthen tissue, they protect and insulate internal organs, they compartmentalize and help transport other substances, and they also serve as an energy reserve and function in immune response. Collagen is the main protein of connective tissue and the most abundant protein in the body, making up about 25% of total protein content in your body is going to be collagen fibers. Connective tissue is usually highly vascular and supplied with many nerves. Highly vascular means has lots of blood vessels and has an ample supply of blood. There is one exception to the rule, and that is the cartilage and tendon in your body does not have a very good blood supply. So we'll talk more about it, but you may have known someone or may have been told by a physician after an injury where they say, oh, it would have been better if you broke it. What they mean when they say it would have been better if you broke the bone being connective tissue has a much better blood supply and will actually heal faster than some of the soft tissue, primarily cartilage and tendon, that's in the joints. Due to the lack of blood supply, the healing process takes much longer and it is more difficult for the body. The bone, many times the bone, not only will it heal, but it'll come back stronger in that spot. So that's what they mean. And that is the one exception to the rule that connective tissue is highly vascularized. Although they are a varied group, all connective tissues share a common theme. And that theme is, number one, they have sparse cells, which means the cells are spread out. The cells are not jam-packed up against each other the way they are in epithelial tissue. There's a lot of space between them. And that space that separates those cells is the extracellular matrix. Extra, of course, means outside of the cell. So this is stuff found not within the cell membrane. One of the examples I think of is crunchy peanut butter. All right. Imagine looking at a spoonful of crunchy peanut butter. The little nuggets of peanuts that are in crunchy peanut butter would represent the cells, and the peanut butter itself would represent the extracellular matrix. So the cells are very spread out, and the extracellular matrix is I don't want to say non-living, but it's the stuff that's not inside the cell, okay? And we'll have examples of that as we get further along. The extracellular matrix is a non-cellular material, not inside the cell, and is located between and around all the cells. So again, think of the crunchy peanut butter. If the pieces of peanuts are the cells, then the peanut butter would be the extracellular matrix. What will we find in the extracellular matrix will be protein fibers and ground substance. So depending on the kind of connective tissue we're talking about, the ground substance could be fluid, a semi-fluid, a gelatinous material, or a calcified matrix. And of course, if we're talking calcified matrix, we're naturally talking about bone. Common connective tissue cells. Anytime you see the word blasts, that's going to be a type of cell. Blasts or cytes always mean cell. A fibroblast are the most numerous cell of connective tissue. They are the cells that secrete the protein fibers, either going to be collagen fibers, elastin fibers, or reticular fibers. And they also secrete the ground substance, which will be different from tissue to tissue. So it could be fat, it could be the calcified ground substance, so on and so forth. Of the other common connective tissue cells, we have chondrocytes. So again, we see the root word cyte. Cyte means cell. Chondro means cartilage. So those are cartilage cells. Next are adipocytes. Cytes again means cells. Adipose is in reference to adipose, which is fat. So those are the cells that will store triglycerides or fat. Osteocytes. Osteo means bone. Cytes, again, means cell. So these are bone cells. And then you have white blood cells. And your white blood cells, there are a number of different kinds of white blood cells. We commonly refer to them as leukocytes, but there are a number of different kinds of white blood cells. And when we get to the cardiovascular system, we will talk about those different kinds of white blood cells. Connective tissue cells secrete 3 common fibers. Again, those fibers would either be collagen fibers, elastin fibers, and reticular fibers. And we will discuss them in more detail later on. So let's get into the first category of connective tissue. The first category is, so this is a main category, loose connective tissue. And loose connective tissue is going to have, there are 3 kinds underneath the category of loose. And it's going to be areolar connective tissue, adipose, and reticular connective tissue. And we'll talk about them right now. So first, areolar connective tissue is a kind of loose. So a lot of times you'll see it referred to as loose areolar. This is the most widely distributed in the body. It contains several types of cells and all 3 fiber types. The reason it is very widely distributed is it is underneath your skin. So it's everywhere you have skin. It is used to attach skin and underlying tissues. It's kind of what I just said. And has a packing between the glands, muscles, and nerves. A lot of times you'll see that referred to as fascia. Next, we have adipose tissue. This is the tissue that stores fat. So it's located in the subcutaneous layer deep in the skin and around organs and joints. If you have ever examined the inside of an animal, so when we cut the cats open, one of the first places you'll see this collection of fat will be around the kidneys. That is the first place your body will store fat, and the last place it will go to get fat when you are requiring that extra energy. If you go to lose weight, there's going to be fat packed around the kidneys. It helps protect the kidneys, gives them a little bit of cushion, and because the kidneys contain so much blood, it's filtering toxins out of the blood. It helps, and they're kind of close to the surface of the body. It helps keep the kidneys warm so that it doesn't cool the blood as it is being filtered. By definition, adipose tissue is located in the subcutaneous layer, deep into the skin and around organs and joints. It reduces heat loss and serves as padding as an energy source. The last kind of loose connective tissue is reticular connective tissue. It is a network of interlacing reticular fibers and cells. It forms a scaffolding used by cells of lymphoid tissue, such as the spleen and the lymph nodes. So it basically builds a framework for the cells of those organs to build around and give them an internal support structure. The next main type of connective tissue will be dense connective tissue. And as you can see, there are three different kinds of dense connective tissue. We have dense irregular, dense regular, and elastic. Dense elastic. Now, pay close attention because there's going to be a different kind of elastic coming on down the line. So be ready for that. But we'll talk about that when we get there. Dense connective tissue of the first kind, we have dense irregular. So if you're going to have an irregular, it would make sense to have a regular. Dense irregular connective tissue consists predominantly of fibroblasts and collagen fibers randomly arranged. And if you look at the picture, so the one on the left here, that's a real picture through a microscope. This one is the artistic version that someone drew. And if you look at the fibers, they're running in all directions. It's kind of, my analogy is, it reminds me of plywood or particle board. The fibers of the board run in all directions, and that's what gives the plywood its strength. This particular type, this is good when it's being pulled in different directions because all the fibers run in different directions. So it gives it strength in a multitude of directions that it can be stretched or pulled. And that's why the fibers run in all directions. So if you look, you can see here, there seems to be no, in this drawing, there seems to be no general pattern. They're just kind of randomly running in all directions. The next kind is dense regular, and we see a distinct difference. Here, all of the fibers are all running in the same direction. So this one is the real picture through the microscope. This one is the artistic drawing. And if you look, all of the fibers run in this plane and in this direction. And what that does is that gives the fibers great strength in that plane, in that direction. So if they're being pulled right or left as they run, that's where they're the strongest. But if they're pulled this way, then they're weak and they come apart, and that's when you tear the tissue. Dense regular connective tissue comprise tendons, ligaments, and other strong attachments where the need for strength along one axis is mandatory. So where you have a muscle pulling on a bone, the muscle is only going to pull in one direction. And when it is pulled in the perpendicular direction, that's when it tears. So that's when your ACL, your ACL holds your knee together, one of the many ligaments that holds your knee together, and its strength is to keep your knee from bending sideways. And when it bends sideways, that's when it tears, and that's because it's been pulled in the opposing direction. Elastic connective tissue consists predominantly of fibroblasts and freely branching elastic fibers. Okay, so this, you can tell, it gives to me the appearance of elasticity because these fibers are all bent and ready to go. Kind of reminds me of a bundle of rubber bands, so that when you pull this material in this direction, for example, and or in this direction, then all of those bent up fibers will stretch out the same way a rubber band will. And that's how dense elastic connective tissue works. Consists predominantly of fibroblasts and freely branching elastic fibers. It allows stretching of certain tissues, such as the elastic in the arteries, primarily the aorta. Arteries are under a lot of pressure, so they really need to be able to stretch and be able to handle the intense pressure of blood being pumped through them. And the elastic connective tissue is what gives them that strength. Now we move to cartilage. Cartilage is our next main category. And we have three different kinds of cartilage. in the cartilage category. We have hyaline, we have fibrocartilage, and elastic cartilage. So there's your other version of elastic. Cartilage is a tissue with poor blood supply and grows slowly. So we go back to my earlier statement. When a doctor tells you it would have been better, you hurt your knee or your ankle, and they say, oh, it would have been better if you broke it. This is what they're talking about. Because the cartilage grows slowly, and because that means it will heal slowly as well. And a lot of times a broken bone is going to heal better than torn cartilage. When injured or inflamed, repair is slow. So the first type of cartilage is called hyaline cartilage. It is the most abundant type of cartilage. It covers the ends of long bones and parts of the ribs. It makes up your nose. It has the rings of cartilage in your trachea are made of hyaline cartilage. It makes up the bronchial tubes and will make your larynx or your voice box. So there's a lot of hyaline cartilage. And when you were a little bitty fetus, doing the backstroke in your mom's uterus, your entire skeleton was comprised of hyaline cartilage that through the magic of ossification was formed later into bone. And ossification is the process of forming bone. All right. So there's a lot of hyaline cartilage. And if we look at the picture, this is this one is the real thing. And this is the artistic version. To me, I always would call this the googly eye look, because a lot of times you'll find two cells next together. And if you ask me, that right there kind of resembles googly eyes. That's one of the things, hopefully, that you can use to help remember what hyaline cartilage looks like. Next, we have fibrocartilage. Fibrocartilage has thick bundles of collagen fibers, is very strong, tough cartilage. Fibrocartilage discs in the intervertebral space. So those are your intervertebral discs. So if you've ever known someone, they said, oh, I slipped a disc. That's what they're talking about. The cartilaginous discs in between their vertebrae. They help make up part of the knee joint, support huge loads up and down the long axis of the body. These are the ones that your fibrocartilage are going to help hold the knee together. The knee, from an engineering standpoint, the knee is a weak point in the human body because there's so much weight above the knee that's being supported that structurally it's just not very sound. And that's why there are so many knee injuries in sports. If we were down on all fours, if you imagine that, we were down on all fours, now the load would be equally distributed on four limbs instead of just the two. And that's would be easier on our knees if we were down walking on all fours. The last kind of cartilage is elastic cartilage. It consists of chondrocytes. And remember, cytes means cell, chondro means cartilage. So these are cartilage cells. They are located in a thread-like network of elastic fibers. So we'll go back to you can see the cells are sparsely populated. So this is the cell, and all of this stuff in between is that extracellular matrix, which is the thread-like network of elastic fibers. It makes up the malleable or very flexible and bendable part of the external ear and your epiglottis. Now, I'm going to assume that many of us don't know what the epiglottis is, so let me enlighten you. The epiglottis is a flap of tissue that when you swallow, it covers up your trachea the top of your larynx, so that food and water don't go down into your voice box and cause you to choke. Sometimes it gets confused, doesn't know if you're eating or breathing, and that's how you choke. But that is the epiglottis' job, is to keep you from choking, and it is made of lots of elastic cartilage. Next, we move on to bone, and bone is bone. Doesn't matter. You get down to the cellular level, bone. There are two different kinds of bone, but the actual makeup of bone, you have spongy bone or compact bone. But whether it's spongy or compact, down at the cellular level, it's all made up the same way. It's a connective tissue with a calcified extracellular matrix. In the right circumstances, the chondrocytes of cartilage are capable of turning into osteocytes that make up bone tissue, and that's what we call ossification. When we grow as youngsters, some of you may still be growing, you have plates of cartilage towards the ends of your bone called epiphyseal plates, also known as growth plates. They don't show up on x-rays because they're cartilage. So it looks as though the end of your bone is just free floating off of the long portion, or called the diathesis of your bone. But it's really not floating, it's attached, but the cartilage is what holds it on. And that cartilage is turning into bone and making your bones longer. And that's how you grow. And we'll talk more about that when we get to the skeletal system. Blood and lymph are atypical liquid connective tissue. So they don't hold anything together per se connectively, but they do classify as connective tissue. Their job is to carry nutrients and oxygen, dissolved gases, hormones, that kind of thing, waste products, so that they can be filtered out of the body, so on and so forth. As we have seen, blood has many cells. It also has fibers such as fibrin that makes a blood clot. And when we talk about platelets in the blood, we will talk about that. That's about the only time blood will connect anything, is when there is a blood clot. So this slide gives a summary of a lot of the connective tissues that we've talked about, from dense fibrous all the way down to bone. Remember, you have your loose connective tissue, which you have three kinds. You have your dense connective tissue, which you have three kinds. You have your cartilage, which you have three kinds. And then you have your bone and blood. And those are all the connective tissues. So this is going to wrap us up for connective tissue. All right, that'll be about all I have to say about connective tissue. So thanks for watching. You got any questions, let me know. We'll talk to you later.